Hi everyone, this is Juliana, and for this week's video, since we're at the end of March, I've decided to do what I've read in the first quarter of 2025. I'm not usually the person who cares about how many books I read a year, but this year I feel like I've been reading a lot, so I thought instead of waiting to the end of the year to do a video of like, oh, what I've read this year, I thought it would be easier and more manageable for everyone, for you guys to pay attention, and for me to list all of the books I've read so far, because I've read quite a lot of books so far. So let's go. In the beginning of January, I was A, moving to this place, and B, filming a Goodreads Choice Awards video on the mystery books. So I've read the top 10. I've started a few of them in December, so in January I was still going through the list. So the first book I've read, Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera, which is quite a fun book actually. I regret not having listened to the ebook for this one. We're following this woman who doesn't know whether or not she killed her best friend in the past. And now she has moved to another city, and now they're doing a podcast on that. So she ends up going back to her town, meeting the people she knew back then, and trying to figure out what the hell happened. It's quite funny. It's very meta. You have the podcast bits built into the book, which is quite fun. I enjoyed this sort of thing. So I've really enjoyed this one. After that, I've read what I believe is going to be the worst book of the year, because I don't think anything can surpass that for me, which was The Teacher by Freida McFadden. It's one of the worst books I've ever read in my life. It's terrible in so many ways. It's offensive. You're basically following both a teacher who is married to another teacher in her school and a student, and God, it's just so bad. Just don't read it. You don't have to read this book just for your own mental sanity. Don't do that, okay? That's what I have to say. And then I've read another Freida McFadden. You'll see that there's a lot of Freida McFadden, and there will always be an explanation for that. But yes, so the next one was The Boyfriend. Again, Freida McFadden for the Goodreads Choice Awards. This one was a little bit better, but that's not saying much when we're talking about Freida McFadden books. I think she's an awful writer. I don't understand what it is about her, because again, awful plots, nothing makes sense, and it's badly written. So why would you torture yourself? I was torturing myself because I was trying to understand what people are thinking when they're voting for the best mysteries on the Goodreads Choice Awards. And I still don't understand, but okay, that's not the point of this. In this case, you're following this woman who's dating a guy she randomly met, and there's a serial killer who's killing the people he's dating apparently. So it's never what it seems on a Freida McFadden mystery, because you need to have 50 plot twists. But yes, it's better than The Teacher. I can say that. At least in the end, you laugh a little bit. You're like, huh. You know, it's not a real laugh. It's the huh, but it's there. And then after this, I've read First Light Wins, which is not really a good book either. God, what is happening? What is happening to the mysteries in this world? This one is by Ashley Elston. It's this woman who works for this secret company, and she has to take up new identities to try and get information on certain people. So basically now what she's doing is she's living and dating the guy she's investigating, and that's all for her job. So one day she's at a party with her boyfriend and his group of friends, and this guy comes up with a girl he's dating, and she presents herself and she says the real name of the protagonist, because obviously she's using a fake identity. And then she's like, what's happening? Why is this woman using my real name? And that's where the investigation begins. It's very dull. It's incredibly dull. But I've read it until the end because I wanted to know what was going to happen, and it's a very disappointing ending. That's what I have to say about this book, really. That's all I can remember is not really worth a read. And then my brain was melting by this time. So I've decided I need to read some good books. And that's why I went for, okay, this is a title that always confuses me, so I'm going to read it. If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler by Italo Calvino. It's an amazing book. This book is just, it's so rich, especially after reading 2 Freida McFaddens in a row. Come on, anything besides Freida McFadden feels like a gift. But no, Italo Calvino is great. So on this book you're following, this is a very meta book in a way, because first of all, they're talking to you. Like, imagine you got home from a library, from a bookshop, and you get on your favorite seat and you start reading your book. So it's basically about the passion for reading. But at the same time, our main character buys a book, he starts reading, and then he realizes, but that's not the book I bought. So he goes back to the bookshop, and then the seller, basically tells him, you know what, you're not the first person to tell me this, but here's the book. And then he gets the correct book, and then it's a different book. So he kind of like, he's searching for many different books, and he meets someone else in the middle of the way. It's a great story. It's very fun. It's a bit confusing in the beginning, but once you get into it, you're like, yes, this is perfection. I loved it. It's going to be on my top 10 of the year for sure. And then after that, HarperCollins in Brazil is trying to reprint or print for the first time some classic mysteries that have been out of print or have never been printed in Brazil. So I've read The Poisoned Chocolates Case by Anthony Berkeley, who is perfection too. It's a great book. You're following this man who made a bet with his wife. The wife won. He owed her a box of chocolates. He's in his gentleman's club. A friend of his, like this guy he knows, hands him a box of chocolates. The wife eats a lot of them. He eats one or two. He gets sick. She dies from it. She's poisoned. So you have this, I forgot how they call it, but it's basically a detection club. I don't know if you guys know, but the Detection Club is a club that still exists today with like some of the most prolific mystery writers in the UK. I guess not only in the UK, but it's set there. So Agatha Christie, Anthony Berkeley, Dorothy L. Sayers, all of these people were a part of it. I mean, Anthony Berkeley was the person inspired to create this book. So you have Roger Sheringham, which is Berkeley's detective in his longer series, with his group of other writers and a random person who's there because they're very smart. But they're trying to solve the case. So what is interesting about this book is that you have 6 different endings because each one of the people in the club gives you a different ending. So it's a very ingenious book in a way that he ended up coming up with 6 different explanations for the murder. So that's a great one. I highly recommend. And then I've read one of the most boring books of the years, which was All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whittaker. And I honestly cannot tell you a single thing about this book because it's incredibly long, it's incredibly dull, and I've completely erased it from my brain. Besides remembering that you have children, a girl is trying to be kidnapped, the boy tries to save her, he ends up kidnapped, and then that goes through many years and they're trying to figure out who is the person doing the kidnappings in the town. It's very boring. I do not understand the hype around this book at all. I was just completely bored throughout the read. I honestly thought of stopping it many times, but I figured I was doing the Goodreads Awards challenge, so I needed to finish, and I regret doing that because I could have spent this time reading something much better than that. And then after that, I've read the winner of the awards in mystery, which was The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. This was also very boring and very long, but at least a little bit more interesting. My problem with this book is that it had too many characters to the point that they were all unnecessary, and it just felt like Liz needed to make the book longer. It always made me think, like, I was joking with my partner at the time. I was like, is she a KDP author? Like, is she trying to make the book longer so people can read more of her pages? I did not understand that. But it's basically a story of a rich family who has a camp for children in the US. They're very rich. And then back a few years ago, their son disappeared. So now their daughter, who's a teenager, is trying to go to the camping, and she also disappears. So you're following the people searching for this girl, you're following the past, what happened to the boy, and you're following a bunch of other unnecessary characters. It's not a bad book. It's well written, but it's incredibly long. I think she needs an editor badly, but that's me. And then again, I needed to read some good books, so I've decided to read Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. This was my first Ann Patchett, and I loved it. I think, first of all, you have this family, so it's basically a mother, a father, and their 3. One is still a teenager. She's like almost an adult, but the other 2 are adults. Their daughters, so 3 daughters. It's during the pandemic, so they are in isolation in the family's farm. It's a cherry orchard, so they're they're harvesting the cherries, whilst also the daughters are asking for their mom to tell them the story of how she dated the most famous actor. So she's going back into the story, and it's a very simple book. She's just retelling her life story to her children. But there's also a lot of theater stuff because she was an actress once, so she met this actor while they were doing a play. And there's a lot of, well, I kind of got interested in this book because I knew it was a cherry orchard, so I thought it was going to have like the Chekhov connection, and it doesn't really. They mentioned it briefly, so I was a bit disappointed in that sense. But this is a very good book. I love this sort of like reminiscing, telling stories from like an olden days. I love this sort of book. I'm going to read more in Patchett. The Dutch House is already on my TBR. I don't really have a TBR, but it's on my radar for like one of my next reads. And then after that, I've read The Hound of the Baskervilles by Arthur Conan Doyle. It's the most famous, I guess, Sherlock Holmes story. Virginia and I, we have a book club in Portuguese where we're reading the 100 best mysteries. I mean, it's not really on 100 because we've combined two lists, so it's a bit more than that. But that was our first live stream, so it was for The Hound of the Baskervilles. Classic Sherlock Holmes story where someone comes to ask him for help because this man died. There's this curse in the family. The new heir is coming from Canada to England to take over the house. And if he goes there, he might die from the same curse. So they want to stop and figure out what's happening. So that's what happens in the book. I'm not usually a big Sherlock Holmes fan. I feel like I had an English teacher who was very much into making us read Arthur Conan Doyle, and I didn't like her, so I've transferred that to Sherlock Holmes in a way. But this was a fun read, very short, very quick, worth it. After that, I've read Big Mole by Kate Black, which was a disappointment for me. I watched Emmy. I think it's when Emmy reads. You know Emmy. Her top 10 books, she mentioned this as one of her favorite books from last year. It's a nonfiction about malls. The author used to live in this city in Canada where the biggest mall for a long time existed. So she's talking about that. I didn't learn anything interesting about malls. And I felt like, because I don't know, Brazilians really love shopping malls, by the way. This is a massive thing. Whilst malls are almost extinct in many countries, in Brazil, that's what we do, which is a very strange concept. But yes, so I was interested in that. I didn't feel like I've taken anything new from it, so I was a bit disappointed, but it's still an interesting and quick read. After that, I've read The Feast by Margaret Kennedy, which is a book that basically I bought this book actually 2 years ago now in Waterstones because I saw the cover and I thought, wow, this looks amazing. It is a reissue by Faber, so they've basically been reprinting a few books. And this was one of them. It's a very interesting story. So we're following this group of people. I think it's in Cornwall. It's been a while now, but it's in a place like Cornwall. They go for a holiday. It's in the 50s, I guess. I may be very wrong on the date. It's right after the Second War, I think. But basically you have this group of people in this hotel, and then you know right in the beginning that a disaster has happened and a lot of people died. So we're going back in the days and learning about these people, learning about how some of them are incredibly awful people, and you're trying to figure out who died and who didn't die. Very interesting book. It feels like a character study in a way. I really liked it. I need to read more by Margaret Kennedy. That's what I've taken from it. After this, I've read Shady Hollow by Juno Black, which I remember two different authors. This is the beginning of a cozy mystery series, which I feel like this is quite popular in the booktube world, this book. I didn't like it. You're following this small town, but instead of people, you have animals. So the animals are the people. They have their own personalities and quirks. One of them dies. A fox, who is a journalist, she starts investigating it. And obviously there's a romance. There is attempts to her life because she is meddling in some business she shouldn't be meddling in. I don't know. I thought it was going to be nicer because people, here's the problem. People describe this book as kind of like, oh, Wind in the Willows and Agatha Christie. And I'm like, it's neither. Really. It doesn't have the whimsy feel of Wind in the Willows, and it's not as cozy. I don't know. I didn't like it. I thought it was a meh. I'm not going to continue with this series. But after that, I've read Sipsworth by Simon Van Boy. And this is one of the most precious books I've read in a while. You're following this old lady she's British, but she basically lived most of her life in Australia. Both her husband and her son have passed away, so she goes back to their house where she grew up. And she's just there to die, basically. She's thinking, what do I have to live? I don't have anything to live for. I'm just going to sit here and wait for my time to come. I'm not going to connect with anyone. I'm not going to talk to anyone. I'm just going to live my life very quietly and go one day. But then one day she finds a little mouse in her house. At first she tries to get rid of him, but then she gets attached. She names him Sipsworth. And through Sipsworth, she starts interacting with the community around her. So that's a lovely book. I think everyone should read it. It's beautiful. It's adorable. It's a must read. And then I've decided to torture myself again because I've heard somewhere, I think it was a YouTube video, but I've heard that some people accuse Freida McFadden of plagiarizing other famous books. And then I've learned that The Housemaid was a copy of The Last Mrs. Parrish, and The Wife Upstairs was based on Verity by Colleen Hoover. So I've decided to read the 4 books. So let's go quickly, very quickly, because I've hated these 4 books. So the first one that I've read was The Last Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine, which is 2 sisters writing together. This was okay as a very obvious thriller. And I say obvious because you know what's happening. Come on, this is a silly thriller. You have this woman. The interesting thing about this one actually is the protagonist is not this innocent girl. She is plotting to steal this rich woman's husband and take her place because she wants to be rich. But then halfway through the book, she gets the man and she discovers that he's actually terrible and he was very abusive. So that's the story of the book. So the wife realized what she was doing all along and allowed her to steal her husband. It's silly and obvious. So The Housemaid is the same thing. I don't need to talk much about The Housemaid. I think everyone on BookTube has read that book. It's awful. Don't read that. I mean, if you're going to read it, read The Last Mrs. Parrish because at least it's more interesting. The protagonist is not as stupid as the one in The Housemaid. So I guess it's better in that sense. And then I've read The Wife Upstairs, which is literally Verity by Colleen Hoover. By the way, I've always said I was never going to read Colleen Hoover because it's terrible. But then I had to read 2 of like my worst authors together. And yes, Verity is better than The Wife Upstairs. But is it really better? Because I think I'm just losing when I'm reading both books. But am I going to watch the Verity film? Of course I am. It's got Anne Hathaway, Josh Hartnett, and Dakota Johnson. So I'm going to watch that, which is terrible because I genuinely believe that this could be an interesting film. It's just a bad book because neither of these authors can write very well. So that's what I have to say about that. Okay. And then, again, I've melted my brain with these 4 books, so I've read My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier, which was great, by the way. My Cousin Rachel is a classic that I hadn't read. I mean, is it really a classic? I consider Daphne du Maurier a classic, but anyway, you're basically following this man whose guardian got married to their cousin Rachel in Italy, but he never comes back because he dies, so he starts thinking that Rachel killed him. But she comes to visit him, and then we're just following their relationship and how they're finding each other. Very good book. It's very suspenseful. It's very mysterious. You're thinking, who is Rachel? Did she actually kill him? Is she good? Is she bad? What is happening? I love this sort of mystery. Daphne du Maurier could really write very well, which is very clear, especially after reading Colleen Hoover and Freida McFadden. You're like, wow, people can write. And that's it. And then the next 2 books I've read were inspired by Miranda Mills, who's my favorite booktuber, by the way. So the first one was Embry Heath by Stella Gibbons. Stella Gibbons is a famous author, but this one is kind of autobiographical in a way. I mean, not really. She's changing her name. She's changing the names of her families. She's changing Hampstead Heath for Embry Heath. I didn't really like it. I didn't connect with the characters. I think that was a problem for me. I'm more curious to read her other fiction. My problem was connecting with the characters, really. You're following this teenage girl kind of like coming into adulthood, and her siblings, their father dies, and they're trying to move, getting jobs. So you're following this family. I didn't really connect. That's the problem. I feel like I've been saying the same thing for a while now. So that's my quick review of Embry Heath. But after that, I've read Falling by Elizabeth Jane Howard. I know that's not what she's famous for, but I love the idea of a mystery thriller, kind of like from the 80s or 90s. You see that I've started filming my next video, and it's a lot of that because I like this sort of thing. I'm getting into it now. So Falling is, again, funnily enough, it's also inspired by something that happened on the author's life. And here you're following a man and a woman, so you're into both their minds, I guess. You have their perspectives throughout the book. The man, he is broke. He's an older man. He's in his 50s or 60s. And he's trying to find a woman that will pay for his life, basically. He's been taking advantage of many different women throughout his life. So he's like, oh, who's going to be the next one? Because I need money, because I don't want to work. But he does that by reading book classics written by women. So he mentions the Brontes, he mentions Jane Austen, he mentions a lot of female authors, because that's how he thinks he gets in the minds of women. And on the other hand, you have, well, the poor woman who's going to fall for that, who is a playwright, who's had a couple of bad relationships in the past, so she ends up falling for him. Very good book. A bit too long, I think, but it's a good character study, and I've quite enjoyed it, and I recommend it. After that, I've read 2 books for the live stream that Vision and I do for our book club, because the book that we've chosen was And Then There Were None. Because of that, we've also read The Invisible Host, which is supposed to be the inspiration, or some people say that Agatha has plagiarized The Invisible Host. But both books have the same premise, which is a group of people go to a place, they start dying one by one. Nobody knows who invited them to that. You have like, oh, this mysterious voice coming from the radio telling you a weird story. I mean, it's a classic. It's a classic, right? So I've enjoyed both books very, very much. Then I've read The Shooting Party by Isabel Colgate. Didn't really enjoy it, but I was interested because someone said it was the inspiration for Downton Abbey. I mean, my book came with an introduction by Julian Fellows, so clearly it was inspiration for Downton Abbey, and kind of feel like more Gosford Park than Downton Abbey, but that's debatable, I guess. Not very interesting, but I like the premise. I didn't really like the book. It's right before the First War, so you have these very rich people going to a manor house in the countryside and living like they used to, because after the First War, that was gone, really. And it's one of those books where you follow the upstairs and downstairs. So that's the gist of the book, really. Didn't really like it very much, but I thought it was very interesting. And yeah, if you're curious, you should read it. After that, I had an idea for a video that I've culled, basically, but it was revolving Hitchcock, and that's why I've read The Wheel Spins by Ethelina White. Really liked it. Very fun. Very similar to the film, actually, but yeah. So you have this woman who's about to go on the train from like this unknown country in Europe to go back to England. She faints from a sunstroke, and then this old lady helps her, puts her on the train. They start talking, and then the girl falls asleep very briefly. When she wakes up, the lady's no longer there, and she starts asking about the lady, and everyone on the train is very confused about that. Or like, what are you talking about? There was no old lady. So that's it. She starts trying to search for the lady. After that, I've done the March Mystery Madness video, which was my last one. So I've read 450 from Paddington by Agatha Christie, Uncle Paul by Celia Fremling, and The Death of a Bookseller by Bernard J. Farmer. I will put in the card here because then you can actually see what I think of the books. What I can tell you is that I've loved the 3 books. I already, 450 from Paddington was a reread, but I've really enjoyed the other 2. So great books, very good. After that, I've started my Rosamund Pilcher journey with The Shell Seekers, and I loved it. I've already bought The Homecoming. Is it The Homecoming? I don't remember exactly the title because I bought the book in Portuguese. It's on the other room. It's a brick. People say I'm gonna love. But in The Shell Seekers, we're following this woman. We're following her back during the Second War and in the current days, which I guess it's the 80s if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while since I've read it now. But yes, so we're following her. We're following her 3 children. And her father used to be a very famous painter who's And then her children want her to sell one of his famous paintings. So that's the story of the book. Really lovely family journey kind of book. I loved it. I cried at the end. I was devastated. I'm going to read everything that Rosamund Pilcher has written. That's my decision now, by the way. After that, I've reread The Pursuit of Love by Nancy Mitford. I don't feel like I should say much about The Pursuit of Love. It's a classic. Everyone should read it. It's a very good book. It's funny. It's sad but funny. It's a very specific critique of society at the time. I love it. Anyway, after that, okay, I'm gonna make a very long story short now, okay, just so I can explain to you why I've read the next two books. We have the largest book fair in Latin America. It happens in Rio every year, and there's a lot of every other year actually, and a lot of very famous authors come here because they do have like thousands of fans screaming for them, and I feel like authors don't usually get this experience. So they've announced someone as the Queen of Mystery without saying their name, but they've put the silhouette of clearly Freida McFadden. Virginia and I got a bit outraged by this idea, and we've decided to call an emergency live stream to discuss this. For that, we've decided to read her latest two books that have been released in Portuguese, which were One by One and Never Lie. Two awful books that try and use very famous Agatha Christie tropes on them. And she does it very badly because nothing makes sense, because if she could actually write an unreliable narrator, these books could make sense, but she doesn't. Therefore, they're awful. In One by One, you have this group of friends who really all hate each other going on a journey, but to a hotel that really, does a hotel exist? Because they're just walking for like a week almost, and they're all dying one by one. So you can imagine what happens with that. The other one is called Never Lie. You have this couple who is viewing a house, but the real estate agent is not there. But they decide to go in anyway, and they stay there because there's a snowstorm happening and they can't leave. There's no connection. But then this is the house of a therapist who disappeared many years ago, and the wife finds the tapes because she used to record her patients. So she starts listening to them, and God, it's painful, especially the ending and the plot twist. I feel like my biggest beef with Freida God, this is turning out to be a video of me just complaining about books, but that's not true. I've enjoyed quite a lot of these books, actually. But the problem with Freida McFadden is, she said it in interviews before, by the way, which I think it's very important for me to say. She says that she does not write a book until she has a good plot twist. But the problem is, what good does a good plot twist make when you can't really write the stuff to justify the plot twist? That's what I have to say. And I'll stop complaining now, because the last one I finished, was Lolly Willows by Sylvia Townsend Warner. And I really enjoyed this book. Although, I do have to say that when people tell you about this book, they're like, oh yeah, it's this older woman whose father dies, so she goes to live with her family, and then she decides to move on her own. She goes to a small village in the countryside, and then she becomes a witch, and she learns that the whole community is also made of warlocks and witches, and it feels very nice, but it takes a really long time for that to happen in the book. So if you're expecting that to come very early, that's not what happens, because you follow her. Like, the first half of the book is just her living with her family, so you're seeing the role of a woman back then, which is great. I'm very happy with that, but just let's sell the book properly when we're trying to get other people to read it. But so right now, I'm currently reading a few books at the same time. I'm reading Miss Mole by E.H. Young. I'm on the verge of DNFing it. I'm not really connecting with it so far, but I'll try a little bit more. I'm reading The Witness by Nora Roberts, which is a spoiler for my next video, but okay. And I'm also reading An Expert in Murder by Nicola Upson, which is like the first one in a cozy mystery series about Josephine Tate, the author. So I'm quite enjoying it. So I would like to know from you, what have you been reading? What have you read so far this year? Any favorite books? Any awful books? What is happening in your reading life? I would like to know that. If you could leave it in the comments, your favorite and your least favorite book of the year so far, I would really enjoy that. So yeah, thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.